it's Sydney from Sunshine and Strings, and today I'm going to be showing you how to do this reversible Celtic wave bracelet. So as you can see, that was the pattern right there. There's a whole bunch of different variations, which means you can make a bunch of different colors. As you can see, it looks different on the front and the back, so it's really cool. This back has like a wave pattern, and you actually don't knot the whole thing. So there's wave knots, and I made twisted ties at the end, but if you look closely, you can see that there's actually holes in this bracelet. See, this front looks different too. There's actually holes, so if you pull it apart, you actually skip knots. So there's not very many knots in this bracelet. So I think it's really simple, and it looks really cool. You could wear it both ways, and I just like it. So there's a whole bunch of holes. And yeah, we're gonna start with these colors. So I made a variation for the colors that I'm using. Here it is. And we're gonna start by connecting the two triangle ends with a forward knot. We're starting in the middle of the pattern here since I made triangle ends at the start. There'll be a tutorial on that next week too. So I'm gonna make a forward knot on the first string and a forward knot on the second string. So I'm knotting with the lightest string onto the lightest strings, and I'm creating this little box in the middle to connect both of them. So this pattern has 24 strings total, which is a lot. So you could make the pattern smaller or bigger if you know how to do that, but it's not as intimidating as it seems because you're not actually making very many knots with the 24 strings. So if you're a beginner, don't be intimidated by this because I think you could do it. It's pretty easy. So I just made all those 4 forward knots, and with the triangle ends, that completes that part of the pattern right there. And now we're going to start on the left side here, right there as the circle shows. I'm going to take the darkest string, which is this red. I'm going to make 2 forward knots on the lightest sage strings, I guess. So 1, 4, and then you pull it through and pull it up, and that creates a forward knot. And you're going to make 1 forward knot on each of those 2 strings. You don't want to pull too tight because then the strings will bunch up and the pattern will twist and it won't look pretty. But if you pull too loose, it could come apart and just look ugly, so you got to find that perfect tension for this bracelet. I'm going to do the same thing with the pink, so make a forward knot and pull it through. As you can see, I'm not pulling it tight. I'm leaving some string there because you don't knot anything in the middle. The pattern shows it's just these X's. So you want to leave the string in the middle loose so that it creates the wave shape. Now I'm going to take the darkest blue string, which is more like an aqua green, and again I'm going to make 2 forward knots on those 2 lightest strings. You're always going to be making knots on those 2 lightest strings. So this is the last one with the dark green, and I'm going to do the same thing with the light green or light blue, whatever you want to call it. So again, you're always going to knot on these 2 strings, and you want this light blue, the last one in the middle, to be the loosest because as you can see in the pattern, it has the least amount of knots with it, if that makes any sense. So you're leaving it really loose in the middle so that it creates that wave shape when you flip it over. So I'm going to do the same thing on the other side, but with backward knots. So I'm going to take the darkest red, I'm going to make 2 backward knots on, again, the lightest strings. We're always going to knot on those lightest strings, and you're just going to make 2 forward or backward knots depending on the direction. So this bracelet is pretty simple. There's not very many knots involved, and you don't have to be super good at making bracelets. If your knots are loose, that actually works better for this bracelet. I tie my knots really tight, so it was kind of a struggle for me to tell myself to make them looser so that it would turn out how it's supposed to look. So I'm just going through. This pattern is so simple, you guys. I'm just making backward 4s, pulling it through and pulling it up. As you can see, I needed to loosen. Oh, wait, no, I used the wrong color. But if you ever need to loosen knots, you could just undo it and make it again, but looser. I used the wrong string, so in order to follow the pattern, I'm using the darkest string first. Again, I'm trying to leave it super loose in the middle. So the first knot that you're going to do on those 2 lightest strings, on the first string that you knot on, you want to make it loose, but then on the second string you can pull a little tighter to make sure it's really secured in there. But that first knot, like the one I just made there, is the most important because you want to keep it loose so that it creates the wave shape. So yeah, if you knot it really tight, the bracelet could like fold in and like contort on itself basically, which does not look very pretty. So now I'm going to connect those 2. As you can see in the bottom, there's 1 knot there, and then the rest of the knots for this middle part are on top here. But I'm just making 2 forward knots with 1 string onto the 2 other light strings, and now I'm going to do 2 forward knots again. We are knotting forward knots to the right to make this little square to connect the 2 parts of the wave in the middle. Now I went ahead and did the right side, as you can see right there. I did that part already, but this pattern is pretty self-explanatory, so I feel like you guys should be able to grasp this concept. But again, as you can see the circle part of the pattern, I'm just going to continue, and this time I'm making backward knots. So I'm going to start with the lightest string, the lightest blue string, onto the very lightest strings. Again, you're just going to make 2 knots on those 2 strings the whole way down. Some tips when you're tying these knots to make sure they're loose is to only go up a certain amount. You don't want it like, as you can see as I pull it up, you don't want like the bag, like you don't want it to be baggy, but you don't want it to be too tight. I don't really know how to explain this, but just on the first string you make it loose, and then on the second string you make it tighter so it like stays in place. I feel like I'm just saying the same things over and over, but you should get the gist of it by now. Backwards 4, pull it through, and pull it up to create your backward knot. The actual pattern of this bracelet does look pretty confusing because there's not that many knots to the bracelet structure, but once you watch this video and you see how the bracelet actually turns out, it's pretty simple. The pattern just makes it seem a little funky, but really you're just making those knots, so it's not that difficult. The lines in the middle are the loose parts of the string that you are leaving. So I'm just making the last backward knot, and I'm going to connect them in the middle again. You are always going to knot on those 2 lightest strings, and you're always going to connect the parts of the wave in the middle with the lightest strings. Pretty straightforward. We're just making like a little square shape here to connect those 2 parts of the wave. As you can see in the front of the bracelet, on the front of the bracelet, it looks kind of like retro, like circles, you know. But when we flip it over, it looks like a really cool wave, and this is like one of the few bracelets that I think looks better from the back side. So yeah, there you have it. And now I'm going to show you what I got so far. So here is what I have completed of this bracelet so far. I tried to make the colors kind of like Christmas holly themed, and as you can see, I think it looks way better from the back. It's like this cool wave. And yeah, I'm gonna go finish this up, but here is one I have already made that is currently up on my Etsy, so make sure to go check that out. If you make an order, please let me know and I will feature you in a video. But this is what the back looks like. It looks kind of like a wave, but also like a flower, little starbursts. Here's what it looks like from the front. So yeah, that pretty much wraps up this tutorial. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you on Saturday.